guys, so the download of today is taken from Acts chapter 28, and it's not a coincidence that's what I'm reading. I'm currently in Malta at the moment, and I was just reading around the mention of Malta in the Bible and what happened here. And to understand, I guess, a bit about the build up to the story of Malta, we have to go to the chapter before, chapter 27, and that's the story when Paul is sent from to Rome to appeal before Caesar as a prisoner to appeal before Caesar, and he goes by boat. They get to Crete. He says, guys, look, the weather's dodgy, we're not going to make it, we should winter here. The centurion and the sailor are basically like, no, we're just going to keep going. Then they head straight into a storm. The storm is so bad, it says they don't see day for the whole time of the storm, and they're blown basically 1,000 kilometers from Crete, from off the coast of Crete to Malta, and that would have been terrifying in itself. And it details the story of what happened during the shipwreck in chapter 27. And it's interesting because from verse 22 of that chapter, Paul says, oh, be of good cheer, there was going to be no loss of any man's life among you, just the ship. The angel of the Lord has come to me, I believe God, and this is what he said. He says I must be tried before Caesar, so just be of good cheer, eat something, we're all going to survive. And then the rest of the chapter details how they try and lighten the boat and what they try and do, and Paul basically instructing them like, no, this is what you need to do, and then listening to him. And it, at the end of chapter 28, it gets them where they basically break off boards of pieces of broken ship, and then they all get safely to land and they escape. So chapter 28 starts, when they escaped, they knew that the island was called Melita. So Melita is the other name for Malta. And then it says, the native people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received every one of us because of the present rain and because of the cold. Now, I know that Paul, they'd said it was winter in chapter 27. I remember thinking, when I read this, like, it don't rain here, and then it rained today, and I was like, okay, God, it do rain here. But then it goes on to say, Paul gathered a bundle of sticks, laid them on fire, the viper was drawn to the heat, but his hand, the native people saw the beast hanging, and they were just like, right, okay, he must be a murderer, because first of all, shipwreck, and he somehow survived. Now he's been bitten by a snake. This is vengeance, this is justice. And then he shook off the snake, it fell in the fire, he didn't feel any harm. They were waiting for him to swell up and die, that didn't happen, and they were just like, right, okay, he's not a murderer, he's a god. And then, anyway, through his 3 months on the island, him and Luke, because it's Luke that wrote Acts, they spend like 3 days with Publius, who's the Roman sort of person, chief man over the island. And it says that one day Publius' father falls sick, so Paul enters in, he prays for him, he lays hands on him, he heals him, and through that many other people come there with other diseases all over the island, and it said they were all healed. And just through that, Paul spends 3 months witnessing, spreading the gospel. It says Publius becomes a Christian, and then through him he sort of devotes his life to that, and through him more people are saved and brought to God. And it just really reminded me of how sometimes when we're really going through tough times, all we can see is how it feels for us and how hard life is for us. But Paul was imprisoned falsely. He was then sent from Jerusalem to Rome to be tried. He was shipwrecked. This isn't even his first shipwreck. Like, he was shipwrecked in Patmos at some time. Like, this is another time he's shipwrecked. We know that he had health problems. He had a lot of things going on. So for him to be shipwrecked, this was just, okay, another one of a long line of bad things that happened to him. Then he was bit by a snake. And if we were in that situation, it would be so easier for us to be like, okay, God, why? Like, everything in life is going wrong. Like, all these bad things are happening to me. But we don't hear of Paul complaining at all. We hear, or what we do know is that God used what was happening to him, his tough times, his hardship, and turned it to good. And actually, if he hadn't been imprisoned, if he hadn't been sent to Rome, if he hadn't been shipwrecked on this island, perhaps if he hadn't been around native people when the snake bit his hand, like all of these things, if those bad things in his life didn't happen to him, then a whole island that now is still very much Christian, and people still, his grotto is still here in terms of the cave where he stayed for 3 months, the house of Publius, who was the Roman who converted to Christianity and then also devoted his life to God and led other people to the island. As a result of that, none of that would have happened if Paul hadn't had these series of unfortunate events in his life. And it really just speaks of God being able to use any situation in our life and turn it to good. And that actually, as Christians, we're just supposed to be ambassadors. So whether in good times and bad times, our role or what we're supposed to do is just be ambassadors of the kingdom, and really be soul winners, use every opportunity to spread the gospel and really speak of God's goodness. And Paul was just he's the model of that, isn't he? Like, his life is just like problem after problem, and yet so many people are led to Christ through him or through what they witnessed. And yeah, it's just a reminder that I don't know what you're going through, but I'm not saying it's easy, but certainly as you pray for God to get you through it, because we know that God says he doesn't give you anything that's far more than you can bear, and that when it does get a lot, he gives a way for you to pass through it quickly and get to the other side. But as we pray that God gets us through the hardships of whatever you're going through right now, we also pray that there should also be a prayer that, okay, God, help me to use this as a way to bring people to you, for people to see you, for me to spend this time of this hardship reaching people that I may not have been able to reach unless I went through this. And yeah, that's just a prayer and just a reminder that there's so much more to the story, there's so much more going on, and God can use the hardships of your life to bless other people, to bring other people to him, and for other people to see him and know what kind of God he is. So yeah, that's the verse of the day. Also, just addendum. In verse 2 of this chapter, it says, the native people showed us no little kindness, and other versions of the Bible say they were extraordinarily kind or unusually kind. And honestly, they still are. Like, everyone has been exceedingly, I don't even know what adjective to use, but everyone has been, like, the kindness has actually been what has shone through. And actually I noticed that even before I read this chapter. And yeah, I just love that some things are just put in the Bible and they don't seem like a lot, but actually it's like, oh yeah, no, I get it. Luke, doctor to doctor, I get it. They are unusually kind. Anyway, I'm rambling. I will see you tomorrow.